There is this default setting we seem to have in the modern world. I mean, we treat success like it's just this brute force math problem.
Oh, absolutely. Like X amount of sweat plus Y amount of hours awake equals Z amount of wealth.
Right. Exactly. We just picture the most successful people perpetually sprinting on this treadmill that's, cranked up to a 20 incline.
Yeah, just constantly grinding.
But then when you look at the actual source code of some of the highest achievers, suddenly that treadmill gets unplugged entirely.
It really does. You find yourself looking at a landscape that is, well, practically motionless.
Yeah, and that is exactly why I'm so excited for today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are exploring a radically different approach to prosperity.
A completely different paradigm, bro.
For sure. So, for you listening right now, if you have ever felt like you are running on empty, but somehow you're still falling behind, this deep dive is entirely for you.
It's a very common feeling.
It is. So, our mission today is to explore this really short, highly provocative philosophical text called The Power of Inner Silence.
Which is, it's an interesting piece because on the surface, it reads like a purely spiritual manifesto.
Right, lots of mystical language.
Exactly. It uses these lofty terms about higher powers and cosmic inspiration. But our goal here isn't to get bogged down in the mysticism.
No, definitely not.
We are going to extract the practical, basically the neuroscience, hiding behind those spiritual metaphors. Because whether the author realizes it or not, this text is making a really bold, highly functional claim about the cognitive architecture of the ultra-successful.
I love that. So let's just jump straight into the core premise. The text states outright, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it says that true wealth is not born in noise and hustle. It is created in the depths of inner silence.
It's a powerful statement.
It really is. The author argues that a noisy mind physically blocks inspiration, and that by quieting the mind, you clear the channel to receive, like, the highest ideas.
Appear in the channel.
When I read that, I instantly thought about the modern working mind. I mean, it feels like sitting in a car, frantically hitting the scan button on the radio, just flipping endlessly between stations.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You're picking up static, an advertisement, just a snippet of noise, and we call that multitasking, or, hustling.
Yeah, we wear it like a badge of honor.
We really do. But the inner silence being described here, it isn't about turning the radio off entirely. It's about finally taking your hand off that scan button and tuning into one single crystal clear frequency.
And that physical action of, taking your hand off the button, that's the perfect translation of what's happening neurologically.
Okay, let's unpack this. How so?
Well, let's look at the actual mechanics of a noisy mind. When you are hustling, your brain is operating in what neuroscientists call the task-positive network.
The task-positive network. Got it.
Right. You are in execution mode. Your attention is incredibly narrow, and it's usually driven by adrenaline or just this low-grade anxiety about your to-do list.
Oh, man, the constant to-do list anxiety. Yes.
Exactly. And in that state, your brain physically cannot make lateral creative connections. You just have zero cognitive bandwidth left for a paradigm-shifting idea to land.
So we're essentially locking ourselves out of our own best ideas because we're too busy, proving how hard we work.
Precisely. You're emitting so much static that you can't receive the signal. But when you create that inner silence, you deactivate the task-positive network and you engage the default mode network.
Okay, the default mode network, what does that do?
That is the brain state responsible for deep insight, associative leaps, and those sudden aha moments.
Like when you get a brilliant idea in the shower.
Yes.
Huh.
That's exactly why people get their best ideas in the shower. You aren't forcing a thought. You've created this quiet cognitive environment where all these disparate pieces of information can finally link together.
That makes so much sense.
The text calls it receiving cosmic inspiration. But functionally, it's just allowing your brain's most powerful associative engines to finally turn on.
Wow. It just makes you wonder how many life-changing business ideas or creative solutions we've all completely missed because our mental radio was just emitting too much static.
A lot, probably.
Yeah, and the author is incredibly specific about what happens once you clear that channel. Which brings us to a really challenging part of the text, honestly, the concept of surrender.
Right, this is where it gets heavy.
It does. The directive here is to surrender, to connect, and to submit to a higher power, whether you want to call it the universe, a higher energy, God, whatever.
And again, stepping around any theological debate, the psychological requirement here is just fascinating.
It really is. The author immediately humbles the reader, reminding us that we are just this tiny speck in the grand scheme of things.
Just a speck.
But then they throw this massive curveball, they point out this glaring human flaw, they write that this higher power is the one you usually call upon only when you are afraid.
Yeah, that detail is incredibly sharp.
It's so sharp. It calls us out for basically treating the universe like an emergency 911 hotline that we only dial when the house is literally on fire.
It's a total gut punch because, well, it's entirely accurate for most people.
Right. But here is my question. If we are only tapping into this connection out of fear, it seems like that completely defeats the purpose.
How so?
Well, if you are afraid, your brain is flooded with cortisol. You're panicked. You're begging for a problem to stop. So how does the text suggest we shift from using this connection as like a life raft to using it as a daily tool for inspiration?
That is the crux of the whole issue. Fear keeps the mind in that exact noise and hustle mode we just broke down.
The task-positive network.
Exactly. When you are operating out of fear, your peripheral vision, both literally and cognitively, it just shrinks. You have this intense tunnel vision focused solely on survival.
Right, you're just trying to put the fire out.
You cannot receive a high-level creative insight when you are just trying not to get eaten, metaphorically speaking. So the text's directive to surrender proactively when you aren't in danger is the critical shift.
Okay, so it's the difference between, say, praying for rent money on the 31st of the month versus sitting in quiet submission on the 1st of the month just to ask, what am I meant to build today?
Yes, the energy is entirely different. One broadcasts absolute desperation, and the other broadcasts openness.
It's a huge distinction.
By proactively recognizing that you are just a tiny speck, you are voluntarily lowering your ego. And for a lot of high achievers, ego is the loudest, most chaotic noise in their heads.
The need to be in control of everything.
Exactly. Ego says, I have to force this outcome. I have to control every single variable. So surrender, in this context, it isn't about giving up.
No.
No, it's about dropping the immense cognitive load of trying to micromanage reality. When you drop the ego and you drop the fear, you create a vacuum in your mind. And that space gets filled with the insights the author is talking about.
That reframes the word surrender entirely. It's not waving a white flag. It's like putting down a heavy backpack so you can actually look up at the horizon.
I like that, yes.
But I want to pivot here because there is something in the source material that really stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the billionaire claim.
Yes, because if average people only tap into the silence during moments of panic, how do the ultra-successful utilize it? The text makes this massive, absolute claim.
It doesn't hold back.
It asks the reader straight up, do you know of any billionaire who does not believe in this higher power or isn't connected to it? And then it answers its own question with a definitive no.
Right.
It claims that all truly wealthy people worship this power from the bottom of their hearts, doing so in the deep trance of their own private stillness.
That phrase, the deep trance of their own private stillness, it carries so much weight.
It does, but we can't just gloss over this. I have to push back a little on this premise.
Forward.
The author is making a sweeping absolute statement that every single billionaire does this. That just feels demonstrably false. I mean, are we supposed to believe that ruthless, algorithmic hedge fund managers and like tech tycoons are all deeply traditionally religious, spending hours in prayer?
Right.
Statistically, that cannot be true. So are we reading this as a literal fact? Or is the text revealing a mandatory psychological state that they're just wrapping in spiritual language?
You're completely right to call that out. If we take the claim literally, that every single billionaire is devoutly religious in a traditional sense, the argument completely falls apart.
Right.
But if we extract the functional reality from that spiritual language, the pattern is undeniable. The author is describing a psychological prerequisite for massive success.
Okay, explain that.
The highest performers in the world, the ones generating paradigm-shifting wealth, they do not operate in the same chaotic noise as everyone else. They aggressively isolate themselves to engage in deep, trance-like focus.
So the worship isn't necessarily religious worship. It's more like a devotion to mental clarity.
Exactly. Think about the actual habits of some of the world's most famous billionaires. Look at Bill Gates.
Okay.
For decades, he has practiced what he calls think weeks. He completely unplugs, goes to a remote cabin, bans all technology and outside communication, and just sits in silence, reading and thinking.
Just totally isolated.
Right. He guards that time fiercely. That is a deep trance of private stillness, Or look at Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund.
Oh yeah, he's huge on meditation, right?
Huge. He attributes his billions entirely to his daily practice of transcendental meditation. He literally drops into a trance of stillness every single day to decouple his decision-making from fear and ego.
Wow, that grounds the author's point in reality so well because, we usually picture the ultra-wealthy as these type A dominators just shouting orders on a trading floor, always reacting.
The Wolf of Wall Street stereotype.
Exactly. But the text is pulling back the curtain, and your examples completely back it up. The actual magic, the billion-dollar decisions, they happen when these people are entirely alone. They treat their cognitive silence with a level of reverence that the rest of us treat, well, our email inboxes.
They revere their mental bandwidth. They understand that you do not build an empire by constantly reacting to notifications or scrolling through a feed. You build it by entering a cognitive space where the noise disappears.
So you can actually see the bigger picture.
Right. It allows you to see the chessboard from a completely different elevation. So the text's use of the word worship really implies dedication. The ultra-successful submit to the process of deep thought.
Which leads us perfectly into the final and perhaps most practical part of our analysis today.
The mechanics of how this actually works.
Exactly. Understanding that this private stillness is the secret tool of the wealthy, we have to look at the physics of it. How does sitting perfectly still actually result in wealth?
Right.
The text gives us its final thesis, and it's basically a complete inversion of modern hustle culture. The author states, "The most successful minds don't chase, they attract."
This is where we hit the most profound paradigm shift in the material.
It says the exact instructions are to silence your doubts, feel the peace, and let abundance find its way to you.
We are so socially conditioned to be hunters.
Hmm.
You hunt down the lead, you chase down the promotion, you aggressively pursue the dollar. But the author introduces the concept of attracting wealth through your internal vibration.
Okay, I have to admit, when I read the word vibration, my brain immediately goes to cheap self-help posters and crystals.
Oh, totally. It sounds incredibly woo-woo.
It does. So if we strip away the mysticism from aligning your vibration with prosperity, what is actually happening in the brain?
It comes down to cognitive framing and a mechanism in your brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS. Okay.
Your RAS is basically the filter that decides what information gets brought to your conscious attention. You know how when you buy a red car, suddenly you see that exact red car everywhere you look?
Yes, all over the highway.
That's your RAS at work. It filters the world based on what you tell. It is important.
So how does that apply to this idea of chasing versus attracting?
Well, when you are aggressively chasing, your internal state is inherently rooted in lack. You only chase what you don't have, right?
Right.
So your mental state is basically broadcasting desperation. It's saying, I don't have enough, I must acquire, I am behind.
Ah, and the RAS picks up on that.
Exactly. Your RAS filters the world through that lens of scarcity. It makes you hyper-reactive to short-term threats and desperate, low-leverage opportunities. You're frantic.
But when you shift into stillness...
When you shift into the stillness the author advocates for, when you silence the doubts and feel peace, you change the programming of your RAS.
So you're no longer broadcasting desperation, you're broadcasting readiness.
You are grounded. You're telling your brain, we are secure. Now look for high-leverage, long-term opportunities.
That is fascinating.
From that grounded state of private stillness, you make vastly better decisions. You notice the massive paradigm-shifting opportunities that the frantic chasers run right past because they are too busy looking at their feet. That is what the text means by letting abundance find its way to you.
I want to use an analogy here to make this really vivid, because a lot of self-help material uses this cliche about chasing butterflies versus planting a garden.
Right, it's a classic metaphor.
But let's look at it through the lens of actual effort and, the physics of it. Chasing wealth with a frantic mind is like running around a massive field with a tiny net, trying to catch butterflies.
Just swinging wildly.
Yes. You are sprinting, you're exhausted, you're sweating, and you're barely catching anything. You feel like you're working incredibly hard, but the methodology is entirely flawed.
It's unsustainable.
Completely. And the inner silence the text describes, that is like deciding to stop running. It's sitting down and taking the time to plant a beautiful, vibrant garden.
Which takes patience.
It takes deep focus. It requires ignoring the frantic people running around with nets. But once that garden is planted, you just sit still. You don't have to chase the butterflies.
They just come to you.
Exactly. The environment you built in the silence naturally attracts more butterflies in an hour than you could have caught in a lifetime of running around with a net. Your stillness literally makes you a magnet for the outcome.
That analogy perfectly captures the functional reality of what the author's claiming. If you don't do the internal work of cultivating that stillness, all the external hustle in the world is just running around with a gnat.
It's just exhausting yourself.
Sitting in silence, feeling peace, and silencing your doubts, it isn't a break from your work. According to the psychology we've unpacked today, it is the most important, high-leverage work you can possibly do. It is the prerequisite for unlimited prosperity.
It completely redefines what it means to be productive.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now? We've unpacked the cognitive static of hustle culture, the neurological power of proactive surrender, the isolated trance of the ultra-wealthy, and the actual brain science behind attracting opportunities instead of chasing them.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. But analyzing this text is only useful if it actually changes your day. So ask yourself, where can you carve out just 5 minutes today to turn off the hustle?
And not just to check your phone.
Right. Not to check your phone, not to plan tomorrow's meeting, but to drop into your own private stillness and actively tend to your garden.
As you look at your schedule to find those 5 minutes, I want to leave you with a final, lingering idea to mull over.
Oh, please do.
If this text is right, and inner silence truly is the ultimate neurological requirement for deep inspiration and massive wealth creation,
Yeah.
it raises a rather uncomfortable question. Is the endless, deafening noise of our modern, hyper-connected world just an accidental byproduct of technology? Or is it a systemic distraction that keeps the vast majority of people perpetually exhausted, reactive, and entirely disconnected from their true power to attract wealth?
Wow. That is definitely something to think about the next time you instinctively reach for your phone just to fill the quiet in the room. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the most fiercely productive thing you can do is absolutely nothing at all.